Mr. McGinty referenced the RCMP, and we do have some breaking news for you. After multiple requests from CTV and I imagine other news outlets to the RCMP about whether or not they are investigating the idea that there could be parliamentarians acting as witting foreign agents, essentially. We have received a statement. It's quite lengthy. I just got it into my inbox, and so I'm just going to share the parts I find the most salient with you right now. You can catch the whole thing on our website, I'm sure, a little bit later this evening. The RCMP can confirm there are investigations into a broad range of foreign interference in Canada, the statement says, including matters which intersect with democratic institutions. The RCMP will not provide comment whether there is an active criminal investigation into any parliamentarians. The statement goes on to say, an RCMP confirmation of such an investigation has the potential to cause damage to reputations prior to meeting an appropriate level of proof or to interfere with an ongoing investigation. Finally, the statement says, with respect to the information contained in the NSICOP report and what the RCMP knew and did not know at the time, the RCMP is part of the national security community and works closely with partners to combat all types of national security threats. Although the RCMP did not receive information regarding all the matters contained in the report, the RCMP was aware of the broad range of work being done by partners. So no confirmation from the RCMP. They say they will not comment on whether they're investigating the specifics of what has been alleged in the NSICOP report. And of course, the government is saying the arena for doing so is with the RCMP. Let's bring in MPs now to talk about where all of this stands. With me this evening, Liberal MP Talib Noor Mohammed. Next to him, Conservative Foreign Affairs critic Michael Chong. And next to him, NDP House Leader Peter Julian. Hi to all of you. Thank you very much for making the time for the conversation. Mr. Noor Mohammed, I'll start with you. Does your government not think it's a big deal that this report alleges that there is intelligence to show that parliamentarians wittingly, quote, assisted foreign state actors soon after their election?
Well, our government takes this very seriously. We were the government that actually set up NSICOP and NSIRA, the bodies that have been doing this work. In particular, the NSICOP report was done as a result of a body that was set up by our government. So obviously, we take this seriously. What's also serious is making sure that we respect our law enforcement and our national security apparatus that are now doing the work that you've just pointed out the RCMP has mentioned. This should not be something that is politicized, should not be a political football. Every political party should be working together to ensure that we're protecting Canadian democracy and that we're ensuring that Canadians feel secure in knowing that their democracy is being protected by all parliamentarians.
I think the point of this report is to say that they don't feel so secure. Particularly, I imagine now that they've learned there could be sitting members of parliament or sitting senators who are acting on behalf of hostile actors to further their own interests against the national interest. I don't think, it requires a conviction to kick someone out of caucus. Are you aware of anyone in your caucus who is among this group of people?
I think the report speaks for itself, right? The report says there are concerns. Those concerns have been turned over to law enforcement.
The report actually doesn't specify that it's being turned over to law enforcement, just in some instances.
So in some instances. But this is the work of our national security apparatus, is the work of our intelligence agencies. They're the ones that get to decide, not us. This should not be a political game. It is not that. And I think it is essential that all parliamentarians and all parties be in the room for those conversations. We're hearing Conservatives say, name names. You said that at the beginning of your report. I think what is important is that the leader of the Conservative Party should get his clearance. He should be in the room to be able to be appropriately briefed, because this is a matter of national security that requires all Canadians to know that every party takes this seriously.
I understand that, and I have questions for Mr. Chong. But in what that your government has said over the past 48 hours would imbue a sense on Canadians that you are taking this seriously. Minister LeBlanc disagrees fundamentally with the overall conclusion of the report that your government has been incredibly slow to react to the issue of foreign interference, and that has aided and abetted in the problem that exists today. He's been on this program and said, I don't come to the same conclusion. On this issue, all we keep hearing is that it's for the RCMP to investigate. We don't know if your government has actively sent this information to the RCMP, whether you're investigating it yourselves, the possibility of members of your caucus being involved. We don't know any of that. Why would we think you're taking it seriously?
Fundamentally, our approach is, and I believe I would argue the approach of any government should be to trust our law enforcement, to trust our national security apparatus to do the work that they are doing. The second the political actors start to determine what our national security apparatus is or should be doing, there's a fundamental breakdown in that trust. So our obligation as a government is to not only be responsible to empower law enforcement and the national security apparatus to do their work, but to ensure that that work remains independent. And that is what Canadians expect of government.
But the report also says that the people around the Prime Minister didn't even feel it was necessary to share this kind of stuff with him. Like, why did they not feel that it was necessary to do that? And again, does this stuff happen because your government isn't taking it seriously?
So again, going back to taking it seriously, the previous government had no such apparatus or process in place for parliamentarians or others to review these types of threats to our democracy. Evidence to taking it seriously is the fact that you have NCIRA, you have NCCOP that has done this report. That is evidence and proof points that the government not only takes it seriously, but that work is done independently.
And actions, what actions?
The actions are for law enforcement and in particular the intelligence agencies to do their work. A proof point of a democratic government is one that says we are not going to interfere in the work of our intelligence agencies. We are not going to interfere in the work of police. That is how you separate, dictatorships from democracies.
Mr. Chong, is your party aware of this intelligence? Have you seen any of it? And will you name names if members of your caucus are among those?
We absolutely will name names of anybody, any staffer, any campaign worker, any member of parliament that knowingly or wittingly participates to further the interests of a foreign state to the detriment of Canada. We absolutely will name that person. But we don't know, because the government has this information and refuses to release it. But let's be clear, this report is damning, and it follows on the heels of the NCIRA report. It follows on the heels of the initial report of Justice Hogue at the public inquiry, and all of these reports are coming to the same conclusion, which is the government is not taking foreign interference threats seriously. This particular report, the NCCOP report, stated clearly that the Prime Minister was advised as far back as 2018 about serious national security threats to Parliament. He was also advised at that time that the measures in place were not sufficient to counter these threats, and he was advised to take further action. The report outlines how the clerk of the Privy Council in December 2019 went to the Prime Minister to seek approval for an action plan to protect Parliament. It then reiterates a second time where the National Security and Intelligence Advisor went again a year later in December 2020, and then a third time the initiative was taken up in February 2022. In all three cases, the Prime Minister withheld his approval. And so it's clearly an indication of a government that is not acting on taking this threat very seriously.
And I'm not absolving them of their, of the questions that should be directed to them in that vein, and I think I did direct them to Mr. Nur Mohammed. But when you said the government is hiding this information, today in question period, I heard the Minister of Public Safety very specifically say he would share it with the leader of your party, but the leader of your party is refusing the top secret clearance in order to access those documents. How would that make sense to any Canadian watching?
There is no, first off, criminal prosecution is not the only tool that we need to use to combat foreign interference. CSIS and other security agencies have long advised that sunlight and transparency is a critical tool to combating these foreign interference threat activities. And one way to do that is to publicly reveal the names of parliamentarians that are willingly cooperating with foreign states to harm Canada and its people.
But what if they don't have proof? Like, I understand your point. That's why I asked Mr. Nur Mohammed. But you could ruin somebody's life. You're essentially accusing them of treason. If you don't have hard evidence of that you have intelligence coming from a credible source, but it has yet to turn into the evidence that's necessary to rise to the level of the RCMP being able to prosecute, essentially, like, is that irresponsible in some way?
If they don't have evidence, if they don't have intelligence, if they don't have information, then of course it would be irresponsible. But when you read this report, it's clear that the government has loads of information about a few parliamentarians that are engaged in this subversive activity. And those individuals need to be named so that Parliament can take action to hold them accountable.
And just to circle back where I started, I hear you on the need for transparency, but I still don't understand why the leader of your party would not want to access these documents, particularly when the report talks about efforts of India to interfere in your own party's leadership race.
So two answers to that question, very simple. Number one, if he goes through that process, he himself is not allowed to reveal the names of the individuals involved. He then would be bound by the Secrecy of Information Act and other federal acts that would preclude him from talking about it, which is why the members of NCCOP are bound by that and unable to reveal the names, even though they know who the individuals are. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is, you're right, the report highlights that the PRC interfered in both the 2020 and 2022 Conservative leadership races. It also highlights that India interfered in the 2022 leadership race. But We don't know if they interfered to the benefit of certain Conservative leadership campaign contenders or to the harm of those leadership contenders. We don't know anything about it, which is why
isn't it responsible for your leader to find out?
We want to know on the floor of the House of Commons with sunlight and transparency. That is the disinfectant, a powerful tool that CSIS has said many times that will combat a lot of foreign interference threats we're facing.
Mr. Singh was the first person yesterday, really, to come out and ask the government about this and call into question why they're not doing more. I have to ask, on a matter as serious as this, that the government is unwilling to really come forward with transparency around the issue of parliamentarians acting as foreign agents. Does that not cast doubt on your party's willingness to keep them in that position of power, Mr. Julian?
Well, first off, Jagmeet Singh was the first to raise this issue of foreign interference. He raised it over 15 months ago, as you recall. It was the NDP that pushed first to have a motion of non-confidence in the special rapporteur that Mr. Trudeau appointed, and to get to the public inquiry into foreign interference. That was all the NDP's work. Jagmeet Singh is, if you look at paragraph 30...
Let's give credit to the Globe and Mail, who put this
I'm saying,
on all of
in
this,
terms of
sure.
the mechanisms and in terms of the tools that were used, it was the NDP in the House that brought that about. And if you look at paragraph 36 of the NSCOP report, it very clearly flags that foreign interference has targeted Jagmeet, that there's been an attempt to diminish him.
Do you believe that to be the case?
I think it's very clear. Both Jenny Kwan, we've seen Michael Chong, and we've raised those points of privilege in the House, and I believe that to be true for Jagmeet Singh as well. So what we have is a direct impact and targeting to attack, in a sense, members of Parliament through foreign interference. What my concern is that the resources for the RCMP and the resources for the Canada Elections Act, the Elections Commissioner needs to be investigating, Mr. Chong pointed out, the issue around the Conservative leadership campaigns. If there were foreign contributions through that leadership campaign, that's a huge violation of the Canada Elections Act. It's a criminal matter, as Dean Del Mastro found out. And I am not convinced that the government has ensured that those resources are in place for a full and complete investigation, both through the RCMP and through the Canada Elections Commissioner, so that we can get to the bottom of this, and charges should be brought if guilt is determined.
Should there also not be concern about the fact that this raises the specter of actual parliamentarians, past and present, sitting among you who could be acting as foreign agents? Are you sure there are none in your caucus? And if you find out there are, will you name names?
We would, but yes, we absolutely have been the target of foreign interference. We've not been the recipient in any way.
And are you okay with the fact that the Prime Minister does not feel it necessary to reveal any of this information?
I'm not comfortable with the fact that the Prime Minister has not put into place the resources necessary for the RCMP to do that complete investigation, and for the Elections Commissioner. That's not an answer to my question. Are you okay with the Prime Minister not revealing anything in addition?
We believe that names should be released when it's appropriate. We believe that the charges should be brought, and we believe if convicted, members of Parliament who have been convicted of those crimes, whether treason or whether it's violations of the Canada Elections Act, should not be sitting in Parliament.
And Mr. Singh said he's going to get a classified briefing when?
I believe it's this week, and there again we have a political leader who has gone through the security clearance. I don't understand why Mr. Poilievre has not gotten the appropriate security clearance on this. This is a matter of utmost importance. It should be a priority for him.
But it's not enough to pressure the government to actually make any of this public. You're okay with what they've said so far?
No, I just said the contrary, that I don't think the government has been strong enough in its response, and particularly in terms of resources to get to the bottom of a full investigation, both for the Elections Commissioner and also for the RCMP. We're very critical of the government not acting the way it should, and we were last year, that led to the Commission of Inquiry. Without the NDP, it wouldn't have happened.
I have just a minute left. I want to go really quickly between all three. Mr. Nur Mohammed, do you know if the RCMP is investigating any of these specific things? Do you think Canadians will ever get answers?
Well, I want to just address a couple of things here. First of all, Mr. Chong said there is information, there is intelligence. Information is not intelligence. Intelligence is not evidence. The threshold of intelligence is one that must be met. And as Mr. Julian points out, if somebody is convicted, if the charges are brought and somebody is convicted, obviously that is a different threshold than just saying, oh, we think we might know something about someone. So I think we can't be flippant about this. And I think we can't be flippant with national security, because when we are making national security decisions, we are depending on our methods and sources, that we don't want to compromise those, that we don't want to compromise our intelligence partnerships with other countries. And so it is essential that the RCMP and others do their work, and if they bring charges and those charges are brought forward and there's convictions, absolutely there are consequences.
Face-to-face a few months ago, that the ability to turn that intelligence into evidence is a massive challenge for which they were hoping for a legislative solution. In the new legislation your government introduced around foreign interference, they saw nothing that would help them do that. Once again, it seems like your government doesn't think this is a big deal.
Well, C-70 is currently under debate. We've got opportunity for all parliamentarians to work together, and it seems like that is something that people want to do to ensure that this is the best possible version of the legislation. And we have said since the beginning we will be willing to work with other parties to ensure that it is the best possible national security regime to keep this country safe.
Mr. Chong, really quick final word to you. I think both your colleagues continue to highlight they don't understand, and I think a lot of Canadians would agree, why your leader can't get the briefing, understand it to the fullest, conduct the investigations necessary, particularly when there may be people in your caucus who are guilty of this, and then figure out what happens publicly after.
Well, quite simply, if you go through the security process, the security assessment process that the government has been indicating that it would provide to Mr. Poilievre, he would be forbidden, like the existing members of NSICOP, from talking to anybody else about who those individuals are.
Well, he just can't name names, but he can still talk about the issue writ large, as Mr. Singh did with foreign interference when he got the earlier briefing.
You'll notice that the members of NSICOP are not talking about the identity of the individuals. And
so they can talk about the other stuff.
They are bound by the law, and that's why we believe that the place for this to be acted upon is on the floor of the House and its committees, where Section 18 of the Constitution takes hold, where Parliament has its rights, privileges, and immunities that allow the Prime Minister to reveal this information to the Leader of the Opposition and to other members of Parliament so action can be taken. That's the way our system's supposed to work. We are to have accountability on this through the legislative branch of government, not exclusively through criminal prosecution. But that's something this government doesn't respect.
I get that, but you also have available the option to get the information and investigate your own party, and you're not going to take that.
But then Mr. Poilievre would not even be able to pick up the phone to say this individual is the individual in question. You need to take action against this individual. That's why he is not willing to go through that process, because it binds him prevents him from from revealing the identity of this individual and taking action. That's why we're asking the Prime Minister to come clean about this on the floor of the House of Commons or in one of its committees.
Mr. Julian, does Mr. Chong have a point that essentially Mr. Poilievre couldn't take these names and have them be investigated?
He can't walk to a podium and do a press conference, but he would be much better informed about what the size and scope of the issue is in NSICOP.
But he would know if his own MPs are among them, and would he be limited from investigating them?
He would not be limited in next steps. I mean, this is something that would make him better informed about the issue as a whole. And I think that's why Jagmeet Singh stepped up last year to ensure that he had full security clearance, so he would be better informed. He was asking questions in the House today. That didn't stop him from asking questions, from pressing the government. So I don't understand Mr. Poilievre's...
But not really going that far to press them because they're not acquiescing on anything.
I don't understand where Mr. Poilievre is coming from, because the Conservative position just doesn't seem to make sense.
I have to leave it on that note. Thank you very much, all three of you, for the discussion. I appreciate it. Talib Noor Mohammed, Michael Chong, and Peter Julian.